Hello, how are you? Hope you're well. I loved your video. Loved it that your dad sent me. Oh, brilliant story, brilliant acting, brilliant singing. Loved the tattoo. Loved all of it. Fantastic. And I especially laughed at the bit where the neighbour was trying to grab his DS. I really loved that bit. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 24, Big Ears the Goblin. And remember, I'm only doing two chapters now because 3 chapters messes up and I have to read it again and re-record it. So, 2 chapters. One day, when Molly and Peter were playing with Binky in the playroom, they heard footsteps running down the garden. "Quick, hide, Binky, there's someone coming," cried Molly. The pixie always hid when anyone was about. He ran to a cupboard and got inside. Peter shut the door just as Mum came into the playroom. "Children," she said, "I've lost my ring. I must have dropped it in the garden somewhere. Please look for it and see if you can find it." Peter and Molly were upset. They knew that their mum was very fond of her best ring. It was a very pretty one, set with diamonds and rubies. They ran out into the garden and began to hunt. But no matter where they looked, they could see no sign of any ring. "Let's go and ask Binky to help," said Molly. So they ran back into the playroom. Binky was sitting reading. They told him how they had hunted for the ring. "I'll soon find out if it's in the garden," he said, shutting his book. "Is your mother certain she dropped it there?" "Quite certain," said Peter. "How are you going to find out where it is, Binky?" "You'll see in a minute," said the pixie with a grin. He went to the door of the playroom and looked around. There was no one about. He whistled softly, a strange little twittering tune. A freckled thrush flew down to his hand and stood on his outstretched fingers. "Listen, Freckles," said Binky. "There's a ring lost in this garden. Get all the birds together and tell them to hunt for it." Freckles gave a chirrup and flew off. In a few minutes, all the birds in the garden were gathered together in a thick lilac bush. Molly and Peter could hear the thrush singing away, just as if it was telling a story and a song. They knew he must be telling the birds what to do. In a few seconds, every sparrow, starling, thrush, blackbird, robin, and finch was hopping about the ground, under bushes, in the beds, under the hedges, and over the grass. They pecked here and there, they turned over every leaf, and they hunted for that ring as neither Molly nor Peter could possibly have hunted. At last, Freckles the thrush came back. He flew down onto Binky's shoulder and chirruped a long and pretty song into his ear. Then he flew off. "What did he say?" asked Molly. "He says that your mother's ring is nowhere here at all," said Binky. "She can't have dropped it in the garden." "But she knows she did," said Molly. "Well, someone must have found it already then," said Binky. "I wonder if any goblin was about last night. They are not honest if they find any beautiful jewel. Wait, I'll find out." He went to the lawn near the playroom. It was well hidden from the house, so he couldn't be seen. He drew a ring in the grass in blue chalk. "Keep away from the ring," he said to the watching children. "When I say the goblin spell, you will see blue flames and smoke come up from the ring if goblins have been this way during the last few hours. Don't go too near. If nothing happens, we shall know that no goblins have been this way." Molly and Peter watched whilst Binky danced slowly round the ring, chanting a string of curious magic-sounding words. "Look, look! Smoke is coming, and blue flames!" shrieked Molly excitedly. "Oh, Binky, don't go too near." Sure enough, as they watched, the ring began to smoke as if it was on fire, and small blue flames flickered all around. Binky stopped singing. He threw a pinch of dust over the ring. Smoke, flames, and chalk ring vanished as if they'd never been there. "Yes," said Binky, "a goblin has been here all right. When a blue chalk ring flames like that, it's a sure sign of goblins." "Wonder which one it was." I'll just go and ask the fairies at the bottom of the garden. They'll know. He ran off. The children didn't follow, for they knew that Binky didn't like them to see the fairies, who were very shy. He came back, running fast, his face red with excitement. Yes, the fairies saw Big Ears the Goblin pass by here last night, so he must have found the ring and taken it. They said that he seemed very pleased about something. Oh dear, how are we going to get it back for Mum? Asked Molly in despair. We'll get it back all right, don't worry, said Binky. As soon as the wishing chair grows its wings again, we'll go off to old Big Ears. He'll soon give it back. He's an old coward. Good, said the children in delight. Oh, won't it be fun to have an adventure again? Where does Big Ears live? Not very far away, said Binky, in Goblin Town. Listen, there's your dinner bell. You go in to dinner and I'll see if I can get the wishing chair to grow its wings again. Sometimes a little singing helps it. The children ran indoors, bubbling with excitement. What fun if the chair grew its wings that afternoon. After dinner, they ran back to their playroom. Binky met them at the door with a grin. The chair's grown its wings, he said. It's in a great hurry to get away, so come on. Peter and Molly ran into the playroom. The wishing chair certainly seemed in a great hurry to go. Its wings were flapping merrily, and it was giving little hops about the floor. It thinks it's a bird or something, said Binky, grinning. It will twitter soon. The children sat down on the seat. Binky climbed onto the back. To Goblin Town, he cried. The chair rose into the air and flew out of the door with such a rush that the children were nearly thrown out of their seats. Steady, chair, steady, said Binky. There's not such a dreadful hurry, you know. The chair flew so high in the air that the children were above the clouds and could see nothing below them but the rolling white mist, like a great dazzling snowfield. Where are we now? Asked Molly, peering down. Are we getting near Goblin Town? We must be, said Binky, but we shan't know till the chair dives down through the clouds again. Ah, here we go. Down went the chair through the cold white clouds. The children looked to see if Goblin Town was below. Oh, look at those funny crooked little houses, cried Molly in delight. And look at the goblins. Oh, it's a market or something. The chair flew down to a busy marketplace. The goblins crowded round in surprise. Good afternoon, said Binky, getting down from the back of the chair. Can you tell me where Big Ears lives? He lives in the yellow cottage at the foot of the hill, said a little green goblin, pointing. The children carried the chair down the hill, for it had stopped flapping its wings and seemed tired. They came to the yellow cottage and Binky knocked loudly. The door opened. There stood a goblin with yellow eyes and great big pointed ears that stuck above the top of his head. Good morning, Big Ears, said Binky. We've come for that ring you picked up in our garden the other night. What ring? Stammered the goblin, going pale with fright. I didn't see anything. Oh, yes, you did, said Binky firmly. And if you don't give it back at once, I'll turn you into a wriggling worm. Oh, no, cried Big Ears, falling to his knees. Don't do that. Yes, I did take the ring, but I've given it to the Snoogle who lives in the castle over there. Off to the Snoogle then, shouted Binky, and he jumped into the wishing chair. The children followed, and up went the chair into the air. They were off to the Snoogle, whatever he might be. Chapter 25, The Snoogle. The wishing chair was off to find the Snoogle. If the Snoogle has your mother's ring, we shall have to find some way of getting it back, said Binky. I wonder who or what he is. I've never heard of him before. The children flew on. Soon, in the distance, the three could see an enormous castle set in a hilltop. At the bottom, all round the foot, was a great moat full of water. A drawbridge stretched across the moat, but even as the children looked at it, it was drawn up into the gateway on the castle side of the moat. There's no way of getting in the Snoogle's castle except by flying, that's plain, said Binky. Fly onto the roof, wishing chair. The wishing chair flew to the roof of the castle. It was turreted, and the chair flew over the turrets and down onto a flat part behind. Sitting on the roof, basking in the sunshine, was the Snoogle. The children stared at him in astonishment. He was the funniest looking creature they had ever seen. He had the body of a dragon, the tail of a cat, always twirling and twisting, and the head of a yellow duck. There he is. He was sitting in a deck chair, fast asleep. The wishing chair flew down beside his chair, and the children stared at the Snoogle. They did not get out of the chair, because really they hardly liked the look of the Snoogle. But Binky jumped down and went to have a good stare at him. Went the sleeping Snoogle. "Hey, wake up, Snoogle," shouted Binky, and he gave the Snoogle a poke in the chest. The Snoogle woke up in a fright and quacked loudly. "Quack, quack, 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 quack!" He leapt to his 2 feet. He leapt to his 2 pairs of dragon feet and glared at Binky. "I've come to fetch the ring that Big Ears the Goblin gave you," said Binky boldly. "Will you get it, please?" "You'd better get it yourself," said the Snoogle sulkily. "Where is it then?" asked Binky. "Go down the stairs there and walk down 200 steps," said Snoogle. "You'll come to a bolted door. Unbolt it and walk in. You'll see my bedroom there. In a big box on the mantel shelf you'll find the ring. It was given to me by Big Ears, and I think you should give me something in return for it." "You shall have nothing," cried Binky. "You knew quite well that Big Ears should not have taken that ring from our garden. I believe you were just keeping it for him till people had forgotten it and had given up hunting for it. You are just as dishonest as Big Ears." The Snoogle waved its cat-like tail to and fro in anger. It gave a few loud quacks, but Binky only laughed. He didn't seem a bit afraid of the Snoogle. "I'll go down and get the ring," he said to the others. "You stay here." He ran down the steps, but no sooner had he disappeared down them than the Snoogle also went down, following softly behind Binky. "Oh, he's gone to catch Binky," cried Molly. "Shout, Peter, shout and warn him." So Peter shouted with all his might, but Binky was too far down the steps to hear. The Snoogle waited for him to unbolt the bedroom door, and then, when Binky was safely inside, looking for the box on the mantelpiece, he slammed the door and bolted it. "Quack!" he cried with a deep chuckle. "Now you are caught, you cheeky little pixie." Molly and Peter were running down the steps shouting to Binky. They suddenly heard the sound of the bedroom door being slammed and the bolts driven home. "Stop, Molly," said Peter, clutching hold of her arm. "Binky is caught. It's no use us running straight into the Snoogle as he comes back. Slip into this room here, and perhaps he will go past us up to the roof again." They slipped into a nearby room. They hid behind the door, and as he passed, the Snoogle popped his head into the room and looked round it, but he didn't see the 2 children squeezed tightly behind the door. "Quack!" he said loudly, and went on up the steps. Molly and Peter slipped out of the room as soon as it was safe and ran to where Binky was hammering on the inside of the bolted door in a furious rage. "Let me out! Let me out!" he was shouting. "Binky, Binky, hush," said Peter. "We're just going to unbolt the door." The bolts were big and heavy, and it took both Molly and Peter to pull them back. They opened the door, and there was Binky looking as angry as could be. "To think I should have been trapped so easily," said Binky in a fury. "Anyway, I've got the ring, look." He showed them a ring, and sure enough, it was the very one their mother had lost. Molly and Peter were so pleased. "Now, I'll just go and tell that Snoogle what I think of him," said Binky fiercely. "I'm not afraid of any Snoogle, silly duck-headed creature." "Oh, Binky, do be careful," said Molly, half afraid. "We've got the ring. Can't we just go quietly up to the roof, get into our chair and go away? I'd much rather do that." "We'll get into the chair and fly away, all right," said Binky. but I'm just going to tell the Snoogle a few things first. The children had never seen the little pixie looking so angry. He marched up the steps and out onto the roof. Molly and Peter followed. The Snoogle was looking all round for the two children, quacking angrily. He was surprised to see them coming up the steps, and even more surprised to see Binky, who he thought was safely bolted in the room below. "Now look here, Snoogle," said Binky boldly, walking right up to the surprised creature. "How dare you try to capture me like that? I am a pixie, yes, and a powerful one too. I can do spells that would frighten you. Shall I turn you into Black Beetle, or a tadpole, or a wasp without a sting?" To the children's surprise, the Snoogle looked very much frightened. He was such a big creature compared with Binky. It seemed strange that he should be so scared of him. "I've a good mind to fly off in our train to the Pixie King and complain of you," said Binky. "You will have your castle taken away from you then for daring to interfere with a pixie." "No one can get out of my castle," said the Snoogle in a quacking sort of voice. "I have a big moat around and a drawbridge that I can keep drawn up for months on end. Do your worst, stupid little pixie." "Very well then, I will," said Binky. "But just to go on with, take that, you silly Snoogle." Binky took hold of the Snoogle's waving tail and pulled it hard. Naughty Binky. There was no need to do a thing like that. It made the Snoogle very angry indeed, but he didn't dare to touch Binky or the children, for he really was afraid of Binky's magic. But the Snoogle was not afraid of the wishing chair. He ran to it and stood by it. "You shall not fly off in your chair now," he quacked loudly. "Aha! That will punish you." "Oh, yes, we will," shouted Binky, and he ran to push the Snoogle away. But, oh dear, whatever do you suppose the Snoogle did? With 4 hard pecks, he pecked off the wings of the poor wishing chair. There they lay on the ground, 4 bunches of red feathers. "Oh, you wicked creature!" shouted Molly in a rage. "You've spoilt our lovely, lovely wishing chair. Oh, how could you do a thing like that? Oh, Binky, why did you make the Snoogle angry? Look what he's done." Molly burst into tears. She couldn't bear to see the wings of the wishing chair on the ground instead of flapping away merrily on its legs. Peter turned pale. He didn't know how they would get home now. Binky was full of horror. He hadn't thought that such a thing would happen. But it was done now. "Well, I think you'll agree that you can't fly away now," said the Snoogle with a grin. "Take your chair and go down into the kitchen. You can live there now. No one ever comes here and you can't get out, so we should be nice company for one another." Binky picked up the chair. The 3 of them walked down the steps very sorrowfully. "We are in a pretty fix now," said Peter gloomily. "I don't know what we're going to do now that our wishing chair can't fly." "Oh, what are they going to do? Do you think Binky's got some magic that can attach the wings again?" But we know that they get out of this, don't we? Because they all end in happy endings. So we leave it there. The next chapter is the Snoogle's Castle. Okay. Love you loads. See you soon. Bye-bye. Mwah.